It is Friday, November 21st. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Air Riders episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The November PS Plus Essential Games are still live on PSN, so make sure you claim those. And also for PS Plus Extra and Premium, the November lineup is now live on PSN as well, and that also means we now have some games that will exit the game catalog in about a month's time, just under a month's time on December 17th. And we do have some pretty high-profile games leaving, which would be Battlefield 2042, GTA 3 Definitive Edition, Sonic Frontiers, Forspoken, which, unironically, you might want to play it through subscription versus maybe paying for it later if you want to be curious about it, so just something to consider. And then there's also Firefighting Simulator The Squad, Surviving Mars, Star Trek Bridge Crew, and also our last remaining PS VR2 games on Premium, that is Arcade Paradise VR and Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge Enhanced Edition. So we have seen ever since the PS VR2 benefit was introduced that games were expiring and they weren't adding any new ones in, and it got down to the last two games. They're gone, or they're going to be gone very soon, so it seems like Sony probably doesn't see much value in paying for these games on Premium when the engagement is probably low. But that's not shocking because VR engagement is low and the headset install base is likely very small. So it's a bummer, sure, but yeah, it seems like we're not going to get VR2 games back into Premium anytime soon, I would imagine. And we also had a very weird thing happen recently where, if you remember when we had Stardew Valley on PS Plus Essential, there was that weird thing, which was a benefit in that you could redeem the game and the license was seemingly one where you own the game, because it was a weird cross-buy situation on Vita in particular where you could download the game that way, and it was more of an ownership license. Well, now Sony, for some reason, 2-something months later, is now sending out emails letting people know they refunded the game to you. There is no change being given to your wallet because the game was free when you redeemed it, but that's probably Sony rewriting the license to where it's now tied to PlayStation Plus, I would think. Not really sure what's going on there. That's my guess. As of right now, I can still play the game on Vita. I can download it, install it, launch it, no problem. So I would think now it's properly tied to Plus, but at least for a legacy version of the game, I'm not sure what their end game is here, basically. I think that's what they're doing, but if you get that email, you did not lose access to the game. But it's probably more of a back-end situation they're finally starting to acknowledge. Anyway, moving on to our first news story, the PlayStation 5 Welcome Hub has gotten a new server-side update that you probably already noticed because it does tell you about that with 2 tiny widgets on top, but it is going to tell you that there's now a new background and also a new widget. The backgrounds, they do update occasionally, so we don't report on every time this happens, but this recent one is definitely pretty neat because it's a seasonal theme, so it's going to rotate based on the current season. Right now it should be fall, but that's something you can set it and forget it. It's going to change throughout the season, so that's definitely neat. More pertinent, though, is the one new widget they added, which was a recently played widget. So based on the sizing of the widget, you can see sessions you've done for a game, total play time, and also progress, which is broken down by in-game progress and trophy progress as well. So that is great to have. I'm always big into this transparency on numbers and metrics and things you're doing with your games, which is always the semi-frustrating part about PS5 is that while you do have these numbers accessible to you, they can sometimes be inaccurate, but also they just don't really show you a deeper level of your activity on PlayStation 5. Nintendo recently put out that app, and that thing is so much more thorough versus what you could be seeing from the PlayStation side of things. So I would love to see them explore more of this, but ideally I would love the Welcome Hub to be expanded upon much further than what they're doing right now. Hey folks, real quick, I'm chiming in with a last-minute news story for the PS5 Welcome Hub, where incidentally I was just going to capture footage of that new widget and background, and then I noticed I had access to new beta features. So there's 2 new things in beta. Not everyone will see this, but there's Showcase Mode and Slideshow Mode. So Showcase Mode is basically a glorified idle timer. You can set it to 15 seconds, 30, up to a minute, and then if you're in the Welcome Hub, the widgets will disappear after that time, and it will show the full background. Now, the weird thing is, I've already verified, at least in my experience, that it only works when you're in the Welcome Hub. You can't be like on it and then the horizontal row of games are displayed. You have to be thumbed down into the Welcome Hub for the idle effect to actually kick in. So that's already a little bit obtuse, but there's that. There's other granular settings too, so you can display the clock or you can display game info, and that ties into slideshow. So the slideshow setting is very much that, where the background will change across the different albums that you do pick. So the albums are PlayStation, that's the ones that PlayStation supplies, where they're more generic PlayStation shapes and backgrounds. And then there's the game category, that's simply still the PlayStation ones they supplied to you, but they're game themed. And then favorites would pull from your media gallery favorites. So you can select one of those and then it will transition. You can set the duration of how often that will transition. You can change the transition type. And if you do enable the game info screen, then it will display the capture data and things like that if it's applicable. But otherwise, those are two new things that are available in the Welcome Hub, which is great. I mean, I was just saying it's cool it would be cool rather to see more things. I'm just already immediately puzzled by like, okay, the idle thing, awesome. That's a very small but great thing to have. And it already only works in a very specific location. So I don't know. It's a bit weird. They're going in the right direction. It's a beta. That's why it is a beta. So hopefully they take that feedback and make sure it works anywhere. Anyway, back to our next news story. Next up, the PlayStation Black Friday sales are officially live right now. They're available today, and here's everything you need to know about what's on sale in the PlayStation landscape. So first off, Sony finally confirmed pricing for those PS5 consoles, which would be the Fortnite bundle. So the 1TB disc console is $449.99 USD. The 825 gig digital edition is $399.99 USD. So here in the US, it's $400. I did see in Europe, it gets as low as $349.99. So very aggressive introductory price there. Very good time to buy PS5, but there's that. And then going back to the US pricing, we have the PS5 Pro at $650 and also $100 off the PS VR2. So all PlayStation hardware, $100 off for the consoles or headsets. And then going into accessories, you have $20 off for the PlayStation Portal, $20 off for the Pulse Elite, $30 off for the Pulse Explorer, $30 off for DualSense Edge controllers, $20 off for standard DualSense controllers, and $20 off for the Access controller as well. Now, all hardware is on sale until December 18th, so you've definitely got a lot of time to buy something there. But for PS Plus memberships, this is where, yet again, they're doing that thing where it's very particular on where the discount actually is. So you have to be a new member or upgrading your membership. You can't extend your membership with savings. So if you're a new member, you can save up to 33% off on select 12-month memberships. So again, you have to be a new member, or if you upgrade to extra or premium or deluxe, that too has a savings of up to 33% off for the remainder of your membership. And that deal goes on until December 5th. So a shorter window on that one. And there's various other deals going on with games at retail and on the PlayStation Store. So that's a great time to buy games. Also, the Sony Pictures Core app, savings to buy and rent movies. If you're a Plus member, that gets even cheaper. And then also an FYI for the PlayStation Gear Store, because that's closing down at the end of this year. There's not much stuff left on there, but what is on there is getting very cheap. So that is also the time to pick up any PlayStation merch if you are in the market. But I'll leave some affiliate links down below for at least the ones that I really recommend and use on a fairly regular basis, which I can't say for all PlayStation products, but they are affiliate links if you want to help support your boy. It doesn't cost you anything more, and you can buy your things at discount, which really this is the time to buy PlayStation hardware. I would wait almost every year now at this point for this kind of sale, if only because things are so expensive nowadays. But whether it's another controller or you're looking to finally dip your toes into the Elite, the Explorer, things like that, the Portal, of course, those are all great options nowadays. Moving on to a new PSN feature you probably noticed recently, and that is PSN messaging now has read receipts, which it took PlayStation long enough to finally offer this, but I will say it's enabled by default. So if you did realize that, oh, hey, PSN finally has read receipts, I know for a lot of folks that's more of a privacy concern. You just don't want people to know that you've seen their messages. So you can turn that off under PSN privacy settings. And that's the thing to really understand here, is that this is turned on by default. So naturally, like other social media sites, They have this on by default, but you want to make sure to go out of your way on PSN privacy settings and turn that off if you want to. So just an FYI, it's on by default, but you can turn it off. Just go ahead to your privacy settings and adjust that. Moving on to Ghost of Yōtei, patch 1.1 is coming very soon. It's a big patch coming out November 24th, and this one has New Game Plus. So I feel like this one is coming much sooner than most other PS Studio games that eventually get that New Game Plus patch. So this one is going to be right around the corner. New Game Plus is going to carry over your weapons, armor, and abilities. There's also going to be a new harder difficulty setting as well, and new trophies. And there's also going to be a new currency called Ghost Flowers that you can use for 30 new cosmetics, which has new armor sets, weapon dyes, new charms. There's also a new replay option coming after you beat the main story, so you can replay certain sections. There's a new stat screen coming, new accessibility options, new photo mode features. This is that big sort of post-launch PS Studios update that naturally most studios have been doing for their big single-player games. And again, I feel like this one's coming much sooner than the other ones that we typically see, so that is nice because I think for some folks, you might have just finished the game or maybe it wasn't that long ago. And I don't know about you, but like if there's a New Game Plus option or New Game Plus trophies, I tend to just like dive in right away and goal path it and do it quick, especially if it's tied to a trophy because the game is just so fresh in my head. So usually that's the more ideal way to play it. I don't like having to go back way later and do the New Game Plus. So I actually really like that they got this out as fast as they did. Moving on to Concord, Sony's failed live service PvP sci-fi shooter from Firewalk Studios, where the game was a massive failure. Game shut down, canceled, refund sent out, studio closure, a very high-profile failure in PlayStation and entertainment history. But with that comes the novelty of, well, what if we bring it back? And that's what some people recently did. A dedicated group were able to reverse engineer the game, and they got into a playable match on their own private server, which does happen, right? Not too surprising. But that story initially gained some traction when the Game Post reported on it, then other sites picked it up, and then Sony became very aware of the project. And so what happened here is that footage of the revival is being taken down on YouTube by MarkScan Enforcement, which for those that don't know, that is the enforcement company that Sony uses to enforce takedowns on YouTube and other various websites. So they do kind of act as a mediator for that stuff. Previously, it would say it was filed by Sony Interactive Entertainment, but now they use MarkScan. So while we don't know it's Sony, it very likely is. And right now, the community on Discord, they're being very cautious and trying to stay as legally compliant as they can. So they did already say they've not gotten a cease and desist, but it's simply a matter of they're highly aware of like the eyes being on them, lawyers being on them. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. So right now, they're not letting in more people into the server, I think, or they're not at least accepting people into the initial trial process, because even the one match that they got into was still, kind of buggy and not all that good, which happens with private servers, right? If there's enough packet captures, then they can figure it out over time, but they were only just able to get into like one or two matches, something like that, and then footage came out. Now it's shut down. So, or at least not entirely shut down. What I hope is going to happen here is that Sony says, no, you can't be like showing this stuff, but we'll leave you alone, right? Because that's the thing, is that it's still their own copies of the game. They're not advocating for piracy or people trying to get digital copies of it. I would presume that's their approach right now, is like, we're just playing within our own private environment, and there's no cease and desist coming for that, I would hope. Because that's the thing about PS3, for example, is that, and we cover this every year, there's still, to this day, new private servers popping up for PlayStation 3, more recent with, Mod Nation Racers. And there's more games coming up too. But Sony they do not care about those games. They let people play them, do private servers, and even upload footage, which I've done very extensively. So I think with Concord, the recency of the IP, how high profile it was, they definitely want that one to be swept under the rug, but I hope that's kind of as far as it goes, and they let people just mess around with the game, reverse engineer it, and get it back to a playable state, which I think is really cool. I will always advocate for that, because that stuff is important. No matter how much you want to laugh at Concord, it is really important that the game with physical copies, people are allowed to do something like that, right? It's advocating for the consumer right that people have with those games. And just for sheer video game history, I think the game should still be playable in some way, shape, or form. Having said that, it is really cool that there was a small window where maybe I could have gotten to try it, because you all remember this, right? Building up to Concord, I was always so open about how it's you know what? It's not really for me. We'll talk about the business of it. We'll talk about what is a high-profile game for PlayStation, but I am not into live service games. I'm not into PvP stuff nowadays. This game is not for me. The game gets shut down. It still was okay, not for me. The weird thing is, I had some Stockholm Syndrome by the time I was finally seeing a lot of the game when I was editing that video from, it was Charles who watches the channel. Hi, Charles. But your Platinum Trophy story, where everybody that wanted to platinum the game within that 72-hour window, so they had to play a lot of it and jump off the maps to gain XP and stuff. We did that video, but his friends sent me over 50 gigs of footage. So for a game I had no interest in, I saw a lot of it through Final Cut, editing the video. At that point, I was finally at the end of it going, you know what? Now I want to play it. Let me see how it feels. Maybe the modes are fun. I can't do that. So in a weird way, I do hope that this community can stay doing what they do, and eventually people can go back in and play it. It's just a matter of you really can't record, capture, or show any of that right now. And I would think that's where Sony's coming from, is that they don't care about the older stuff. But Concord, that's kind of they're a little more litigious there, and they want to make sure that that's not a thing. So we'll see how it goes over time. We'll follow this community and see what happens. Moving on to Horizon Steel Frontiers, the new MMO from NCSoft, coming to mobile and also PC via Purple. I wanted to naturally say PS5, but that's the thing. No PlayStation 5. So we do have some commentary here on what's going on with that. So recently, with this interview from 4gamers.net, we have the executive producer and vice president of NCSoft, where they were asked about that PS5 version for the game, and they responded with, and I quote here, "That was the most common response today. NCSoft has no reason not to do it, so we would love to do it, but since it's not something we can decide on our own, we'd like to continue discussions." End quote. Now, that was via translation. There could be some context that's lost on that, but otherwise that's what they're saying, which I'm not sure what else they really can say. With NCSoft and PlayStation, these people are not dumb. They know that was going to be the number one response to this game's announcement, is that how is there no PlayStation 5 version? So I don't know where they go from here as far as any sort of PR they do for this game, where that's going to come up probably every time, and it should, because it would be great to get maybe a much more clear answer on where the decision making was, because it simply looks bizarre to not have PlayStation 5. Having said that, I still am kind of the same opinion as I was last week, and that surely that's on the roadmap, but with all live service games, their future is contingent on their success, and that even extends to things like pre-orders if they're going to be sold a la carte, basically. If they're not free to play, if there is a base price you have to get into, all that stuff is highly contingent on how well it does. So season 1, 2, 3, all these things will be on the roadmap. It could be dead or killed off if the game is not successful. So I would have to imagine with no PS5 at launch, that simply means it's maybe 1 year in or something like that. I would be blown away otherwise if this game does find an audience, it's highly successful, it's monetized properly, they're making good money, and it doesn't come to PlayStation 5 within a month or so, or excuse me, a year or so. I don't know what the roadmap looks like, right? But you would have to think PlayStation's not that far behind. But then again, they announced the game without PS5, so I don't know. It's still really important to understand, though, the game is very much developed on mobile first, and that was a conscious choice from NCSoft and also PlayStation themselves. We'll have to wait and see if it does eventually come to PlayStation 5, but this game itself is still pretty far away from ever coming out to begin with. Moving on to some very insightful context on why PlayStation is now doing that Japanese language only PS5 console in Japan, where they now have this renewed focus on trying to really penetrate that market better. So recently we had this report from TV Tokyo where it was translated by Hartman over on the Install Base forums, and Sony decided to do the Japanese language only PS5 within the last 4 months since they saw Nintendo do the same with the Switch 2. And it's a bet that SIE CEO Hideaki Nishino is willing to do, even if the company does take a loss on selling that hardware. And the understanding here is that the previous SIE leadership, so Jim Ryan in this case, were unconcerned with PlayStation downsizing as much as it did in the country. But with the Switch 2 now getting games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, RE Requiem, and the pricing strategy for Switch 2 hardware, there is renewed focus in the region. And I think that's the thing to really take away here is that PlayStation, at the very minimum during the PS4 and PS5 cycle, that was the one thing they could lean on was that, oh, we're still the high performance box that can see the releases for these bigger AAA games. And that's from third parties, right? So in a way, you almost were always the de facto box for a lot of these major titles coming out because they were not going to reliably run or ship on Switch 1. Switch 2 is now here, and as that console starts to ramp up its install base, that is going to be something that PlayStation no longer has. But that's the other thing to consider here is that that was the one thing they always had throughout PS4, 5, and these consoles are incredibly successful, and that still didn't really do anything for the Japanese market, and they just kept downsizing for the past 8, 7-ish years, more than that really, since the later PS3 days. That's the thing, like there's external factors at play that Sony can't reasonably control. It's always a frustrating thing when the Japanese, story comes up, or this topic with PlayStation and that marketplace, and that they put out really strong, compelling consoles, and I just don't really buy this response of, well, they should have focused on there more. They shouldn't have closed Japan Studio, as if that was somehow going to make those consoles have the same install base that they did throughout PS1, 2, 3. That's just not realistic, you know what I mean? So there's only so much you can do when that marketplace and that customer base, those consumers, if they're shifting more towards portable play or PC or mobile, you either have to be there and offer and do those things, or you just have a product that's going to downsize. So, I can see where Jim Ryan was coming from. I don't agree with it, obviously, because I think there is still something that could have been done, but it's just really hard. Hideaki Nishino, I think it makes sense because for him, it's like, well, he never really, as far as I know, he never left Sony corporate, or at least the hardware team in Japan. Like, he was always stationed there. He was never in the West. I'm sure he's the kind of person that did site visits all the time, but for the most part, he was in Japan probably seeing that thing or seeing that shift throughout his entire career. Now he's in a place where he can make a meaningful difference and change, and maybe that's what he's attempting to do. And the other elephant in the room here is that, well, they also want to prepare for this PlayStation Portable, and that is the key product that will make some meaningful difference in that marketplace. So perhaps now is the time where they might not make a dent with PS5 consoles, but they can start to do something there and build some rapport, maybe get people into that ecosystem before they finally offer the truly compelling device that audience wants. I would think that's the key thing that we're really missing in this conversation, because I've already seen plenty of folks and industry analysis say that this cheaper PS5 probably isn't going to move the needle all that much. And yeah, it probably won't, but it might do something just to sort of set up the idea that, hey, we've also got this handheld coming now, and this is the product that you're really ready for. And it will be more performant than a Switch 2 at that point. Moving on to some third-party news, beginning with the Xbox Partner Showcase livestream, which aired just yesterday. It was about 30 minutes long, and as we know from Xbox live streams this point on, it will showcase if it's coming to PS5 or not for each individual game. And so, as we often do, here is every single announcement that you need to know about that's coming to PS5. Actually, there are some games that are not coming over, so that was maybe a little bit surprising. But first up was Armistice. That was announced. It looks like Returnal. It's very heavily inspired by Returnal, I would have to imagine. So it's a roguelite coming next year, 2026. The Mound, Omen of Cthulhu. This is a co-op adventure survival FPS coming 2026. Next up was Dave the Diver in the Jungle DLC. That's coming early 2026. And then Crowsworn. This is a Metroidvania. No release window was given, but new trailer there. Echo Generation 2. This is one game not coming to PS5. After this announcement was Vampire Crawlers, which is basically a spin-off, or I guess sequel, but it's a roguelike deck builder game and the Vampire series coming next year, 2026. Next up was a new gameplay trailer for 007 First Light, showing the Aston Martin Valhalla. Roadside Research. This is another game not coming to PS5 for the time being, but there was the announcement trailer for that. Total Chaos, the psychological survival horror game with the music by Akira Yamaoka, that shadow dropped right away. Then we got a new trailer for Reanimal, demo available right now. Game is coming out February 13th, 2026. And then Erosion was announced. This is an isometric viewpoint open world roguelike coming in 2026. Zoopunk was announced. This is a third-person action combat game. No release window was given, but this is a prequel to Fist Forged in Shadow Torch. Next up was Clover Pit. That game was shadow dropped on Xbox. No PS5 for the time being. Hitman DLC, Eminem versus Slim Shady, so you can take out Slim himself with Eminem, and that's coming out December 1st. And then next was a new gameplay trailer showing off a boss fight for Tides of Annihilation. And this looked absolutely nutty, really crazy, weird, maybe a little bit too scripted, but Tides of Annihilation is looking insane. And then Raji Kali Yuga was announced, a sequel to the previous Raji game that is coming out as well. There's no release window, so it's simply a standard announcement video, but that was the partner showcase, the Xbox partner showcase. So 3 things as of right now not coming to PS5. I'm curious if Microsoft still is in a position where the Xbox team is doing some publishing agreements that does say like, hey, we'd like some exclusivity for so-and-so amount of time. Because, you know, not to say like, oh, everything's going to be coming over now, but it's fascinating that you do still see some of these agreements sort of trickle out. They might have been signed a while ago for all we know, so it might be something the company is not willing to do anymore, but you're still seeing a handful of games that will ship over there before they come to PlayStation 5. Clover Pit was the one where I was like, oh, because that game looks so good, highly addictive, and I'm hoping that will eventually come to PS5, similar to Vampire Survivors that eventually came over, but that's the same thing for most of these games. They all look good. Yeah, Armistice is not really surprising per se, but just that like you watch it and you're like, oh man, so those developers were undeniably inspired by Returnal, and that's sort of what you got from this game now. And it does look compelling, even though it's from the same studio as they put out Godfall, so that's Counterplay. So just a little FYI there. They could obviously always turn it around, but there's that. Tides of Annihilation looked insane. The shadow drop for Total Chaos looks really good. I mean, this was actually a very compelling 30-minute live stream. A lot of really good stuff. And it's great that we got more game announcements where it still feels incredibly overwhelming with just how much compelling content there is and how much is coming out early next year and throughout most of 2026. Next up, Call of Duty Black Ops 7 has been going through it this past week with a string of bad news stories. Not only did we initially see prior to this week where the single-player campaign was getting clowned on left and right for some silly moments in it, that it's being labeled as the worst COD campaign or one of the worst ones. It's also tied to internet, I believe, which is so asinine, but also we're hearing that for the retail sales of this game in the UK, they were smaller than Battlefield 6. People are quick to point out that the peak player counts for this game are not even close to Black Ops 6, the previous one, and also Battlefield 6 had an incredibly successful launch where we're seeing October data come in from Circana, where it's the best-selling game of the year so far, which also made it the best-selling game in the series history so far, and all the while, it's been confirmed from Activision once again that AI art is being used in the game, this time for the calling cards, posters, and reward icons in the game, and they're just being very open about it. Yes, AI is being used. It's a very PR spruced up answer, but when it gets into this sort of territory, which they've already done previously, where it's the creative side, when it's art assets, things that, reasonably speaking, a creative person could have been doing that, like that's where it looks pretty ugly. And in my view, flat out gross. I mean, again, I always repeat myself on this topic, but it's this is where I'm firm on it. When it gets into the creative side for Gen AI, that's what I don't like. And it really rubs me the wrong way. And the more we keep seeing this, the more I'm just so... it has an ick factor to me. I really don't like it. AI does have a place in game development. It is certainly going to be an extension of human work, but when it starts replacing something very creatively that human touch could have been involved in, it sucks. I mean, in Call of Duty, it has been a annual well-oiled machine that these studios also get reasonable time to ship these games, but based on the studio hierarchy and when they sort of swap around responsibilities, but also the amount of people that are assigned to these games and how much they outsource, like they're incredibly successful, so it's disappointing to see. I don't know, it's just the whole thing is, I can't say I'm really shocked to see Call of Duty fall off the way that it's falling off, not to suggest that the franchise isn't still probably selling completely fine, but we've got some very early key indicators that, maybe it is starting to see a player drop off that Activision wasn't necessarily expecting, where at some point all good things do come to an end, and I say that very loosely because it's not over, but there's always peaks, right? And so it seems like 7 is having a bit of a drop-off when you've got a lot of players looking to finally jump into something new and interesting and different. And so with things like Battlefield 6 being a true reform to that franchise, or Arc Raiders being this new creative thing, which that's also got its own little AI controversy, but at the very minimum, it's a new unfamiliar IP to people, and it's still fun and engaging, right? So it's like there's other options out there versus this annual game that shows up every single time. And, now it's just... That's seemingly where it's been going lately. Moving on to Jeff Keighley's The Game Awards, where this time around for 2025, PlayStation has picked up 19 total nominations between DS2 and also Ghost of Yōtei, and a handful of other things as well. But for DS2, it was nominated for Game of the Year, Best Art Direction, Best Score and Music, Best Audio Design, Best Narrative, Best Action Adventure Game, and Best Game Direction. Ghost of Yōtei was nominated for Best Performance, Best Art Direction, Best Score and Music, Best Audio Design, Best Narrative, Best Action Adventure Game, and Best Game Direction. And then the other nominations are Helldivers 2 in Best Ongoing Game, Helldivers 2 in Best Community Support, Best Adaptation, Sony has The Last of Us Season 2 and Until Dawn, and then Most Anticipated Game, Marvel's Wolverine. So another successful year for PlayStation Studios, where for the 1 or 2 games they put out, the big high-profile titles, they usually sweep across at least nomination categories, although I think it's pretty safe to say that the year to win, or the favorite to win this year, rather, is undeniably Clair Obscur. In fact, we recently had the Golden Joystick Awards as well, and for that event, Clair Obscur won Best Storytelling, Best Visual Design, Studio of the Year, Best Soundtrack, Best Supporting Performer for Ben Starr, Best Lead Performer, Jennifer English, and it also won the overall Game of the Year. Ghost of Yōtei did win Best Audio Design and the Console Game of the Year categories. So we already had one event play out, and this is what I often say for Game of the Year shows, or this usual time frame, is that there's many places that run this ceremony. So Yōtei may pick up 1 or 2 of them. I would assume it picks up a handful, but I think this year is it's going to be a Clair Obscur fan fest. I mean, the game it's incredibly well received. In fact, I'm hoping by sometime in December, maybe over that New Year's weekend, I can finally catch up on all the things that I've not been able to play just yet. So I have got all these games that I like, these franchises or new IP that I love dearly or want to try out, and I can't wait to dive in. Clair Obscur, I'm sure I will love, and I'll finally get what everybody's talking about. But for the time being, you can easily see it from the outside looking in, that seems to be the favorite that is going to win. So I don't know if there's going to be that many surprises this year, but it is a very packed year. I think everybody does deserve to be nominated for what is listed up there. It's just going to be, I think, a really tough win for any other games in all these categories to edge out Clair Obscur when it really did excel in a lot of different categories. having said that, DS2 and Ghost of Yōtei, I think, is definitely going to be heavy on more of the specific categories where they might really excel at. They might pick up some awards there too. Moving on to some PlayStation Productions news, Twisted Metal Season 3 is confirmed, and it's getting a new showrunner with David Reed. They are replacing Michael Jonathan Smith. So, I've said previously, I've not seen Season 1 or 2. I can't really speak on the quality of it, but the one thing I can say is that people seem to really stand behind this show, and they say it's good, it's really compelling, and it must be true because it's now going on 3 seasons, and it is completely picked up. Not sure if the showrunner is really going to change that or not. That remains to be seen, but I'm happy to see that Twisted Metal fans and even non-Twisted Metal fans are really enjoying this. I mean, if you would have asked me 3-4 years ago prior to the show being confirmed if a Twisted Metal adaptation was going to be good and it would get 3 seasons, I would have thought no way. And that's just the pessimism of how often video game adaptations have been poor, but not only is Twisted Metal good, but it's close to the source material. It follows the lore quite well from what I hear, and it's successful. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where 3 of you can win a code for Goodnight Universe on PlayStation 5. I would like to congratulate these viewers right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X. And for this week, we have another game giveaway, Morsels on PlayStation 5. This came out this past week. It's a top-down creature collecting roguelite with some bullet hell action. I love the aesthetic of this game as well. And we have 3 codes to give away courtesy of Annapurna Interactive. So if you would like to win, follow the link down below or scan the QR code and enter the Gleam giveaway, and we'll announce the winners next week because we are trying to give away this game. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And our Tuesday video was the harsh reality of selling retro games on modern consoles. So that was an interview with the Implicit Conversion CEO. A lot of very juicy industry things in there about how problematic it can be to get those old IP relicensed for modern consoles. It's not nearly as easy as you think. A lot of news stories on their own that are baked into that episode from this past Tuesday, so go check it out. I appreciate all the kind words from that upload as well. As I mentioned before, trying to do more industry interviews, and we do have more on the way, so be on the lookout for those. And also, I should mention, supporting on Patreon or YouTube will get you access to the full interviews, but also just supporting your boy gets you access to the back catalog of extended clips and deleted scenes and things of that nature, which we will certainly have that for a 30 Platinums video, which I do not know when that will be ready. I'm still chipping away at that, but it is coming. Other than that, I think we have Click R3 coming up very soon. And that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.